Gentlemen of the Commonwealth Club, I have one or two announcements. As you know, today's luncheon is in lieu of the regular Friday luncheon. The broadcast of today's program will take place tonight at 8:10. There will be no broadcast on Friday or on Sunday. On Wednesday, there's a ticket dinner meeting. The tickets are on sale here today at Coffee Dan's restaurant. The subject, the Taft-Hartley Act, is it in the public interest? And finally, and coming at the end of the year, the annual Ladies' Holiday Luncheon will take place on the 31st of the month. Gilbert and Sullivan and all the fine things that go with it are the fare. As I came in today, moving from the entrance up to the speaker's table, it occurred to me that it was quite a fantastic business that I should be introducing Henry Grady in San Francisco. Some of you have known him as professor and dean at the University of California. Some of us have known him in government, where he occupied many high posts, including that of Assistant Secretary of State from 1939 to 41. Still others have known him as president of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce and of the American President's Line. I suppose our people and the officials of government throughout the world have come to think of him as the man who is sent to the trouble spots of the globe today by our government. First, after the war, it was Italy, then Greece at the time of the elections, then Palestine. At a time, a delicate moment in the history of India, our first ambassador to the government of India. And most recently, since early this year, another mission to Greece. It's about this last mission that he's going to speak to us today, Ambassador Henry Grady.
Mr. Chairman, friends of the Commonwealth Club, I do feel that perhaps I know more people in this room than anyone, with the exception possibly of Stuart Ward. So it is a matter really of coming home and of seeing friends and getting that warm sense of welcome that one always gets in San Francisco, especially if he is an old-timer in this wonderful city. I have come here for a short, very short, too short stay. I rather reversed the processes this time. Usually I report to the Commonwealth Club first and then to the Secretary of State and the President. This time I reported to the President and the Acting Secretary of State and then third to the Commonwealth Club. But it's simply a reversal of my usual procedure and my procedure that I prefer. The problem in Greece is one that is characteristic to a degree of a number of countries in the world today, and the terms and conditions upon which Greece can be aided to recovery are not unlike those of the whole 16 countries included in the ERP or the Marshall Plan. However, there are particular circumstances with regard to Greece that make it different in many fundamental respects than the conditions, especially of the Western European countries. In Greece, there is active warfare going on. That is not the case in any of the other countries. In other words, while we are sponsoring the forces of recovery and the forces of construction, we have an active campaign of destruction going along simultaneously with our efforts. You'll realize how difficult that makes our problem as I go on discussing the various aspects of the work of the American mission in Greece. I think the world situation today can be described as a struggle between the forces of upbuilding and the forces dedicated to pulling down. And we have in Greece a concentration of this world problem. But we must keep in mind that it is a world problem, and that Greece is simply one point where it is particularly accentuated. I think that the policy which we are pursuing, which we started with regard to Greece and Turkey, and which we have extended a year later to 14 other countries, is a decidedly new departure in American foreign policy. In foreign policy, as far as that's concerned, of any country in the world. There's never been a time when one country undertook to do so much for so many, and undertook to do it in the way we are trying to do this job incorporated in the Marshall Plan. It's a delicate, difficult, daring undertaking. The least, perhaps, of the problems involved are those of the sacrifices which we must make in order to provide the resources for recovery in the world. The problems, the difficult problems, are the problems of doing this job in a way that will be successful. It is a stupendous undertaking for any country to attempt to aid other countries through various measures and through organization and so on, without in some way impairing the very thing which we are trying to build up. We have decided long since in this country that we are not going to make loans or give funds away unless we supervise them. And that is sound policy. We, in the past 50 years, have given away a great deal of money. Not only did it do injury to us, to our resources in particular, but it did not serve the purpose that we intended. So we are dedicated to the principle of directed assistance. We're not going to give large sums of money to any country and say, now, boys, the only condition you're getting this money is that you don't tell us what you're going to do with it. There are countries that want us to give money and resources in that way, but I think it's the last thing that our country can do. But in directing expenditure and in giving assistance, there are very difficult problems. We must rise to the occasion of these new responsibilities. And I sincerely hope that we will prove to have the wisdom and the finesse to do this great undertaking without failure. And I am confident that we will. But I am equally aware of the problems involved. So I would like to just give briefly the philosophy behind the whole recovery program, which Mr. Marshall outlined something over a year ago at Harvard University, in which he pointed out the great desirability of getting the countries, especially the democratic countries of Western Europe, that his plan originally envisioned all the countries of Europe, together for a cooperative effort, with us making up a residual which they could not supply. So the ERP is essentially a cooperative effort with the countries involved bearing the main responsibility for putting the program through, of giving of their resources, of exchanging their merchandise, of in every way developing an international cooperation of the countries concerned that will move in the direction of their recovery. And then we are prepared to come in and generously make up what is left to be done when they have done everything in their power. Now, I say this is a departure in the sense that it seems to me it parallels the conception of social work. Going back not so many years ago, charity was a matter of giving, and the merit of giving was in itself regarded as the justification of the charity. But nowadays, we have learned, and we have in our universities courses in social work, we realize that unless we can help people to help themselves, any effort we make is wasted. And so we are applying to the international situation that concept of helping countries to help themselves, and for that reason, the basis of the program is the effort of the countries involved. And so we must be careful on the one hand to give an adequate amount of assistance, otherwise it's wasted. And on the other hand, we must be careful not to give too much, otherwise it does not serve the purpose intended, and the countries concerned get into an attitude which perhaps is worse than if they had no help at all. Those points represent some of the dangers which we face in this program, in addition to the danger of too much direction within the country in our effort to see that the expenditure is done correctly and that the results are commensurate with our effort. I say that Greece is different than the other countries because of the active war going on there. The war started shortly after the elections of 46, March 46, almost 3 years ago. We observed, we had a mission of British, American, and French to observe the elections. We were the umpires. We did not conduct the elections. We observed them. And we reported that they represented the will of the people. They represented, the outcome represented the democratic wishes of the people of Greece. There was some corruption, there was some pressure, but the percentage was less than 3%. And so the unanimous verdict of our mission and of our experts was that the election did meet the conditions of a fair reflection of the people's wishes. We, at the time, our communist friends said they were not going to make any trouble on election day, but they were going to make plenty afterwards, and sure enough they have. Because they started right after the elections to make trouble for the party which had been elected by the will of the people. They themselves had refused to participate. It's the standard communist tactics not to participate in elections unless they can completely control them. Representatives of the communists came to us a few days before the election, came to the heads of the three missions and tried to persuade us that the election should be put off because conditions were not favorable. We said, well, why don't you participate? And they rather naively said they didn't want to participate because they didn't think they could win. And I said, we have elections all the time and we have to take those chances. And if we don't participate, we have no right to complain about the results. But this little speech of mine didn't have very much effect. And so they have been on the outside of government. They've been on the outside of the people trying to overthrow the government and set up a communist government in its place. And the technique which is used is familiar, I think, to all of you. We have seen it work in so many countries. It's a matter of fifth column activity. It's a matter of gradually getting into the key positions, and then finally a coup becomes possible, and you have a regime that takes its orders from the Kremlin. That would have happened in Greece without the slightest doubt if the British had not been in there and intervened in the winter of 43 and 44 and prevented this so-called civil war, which was a struggle of the communists to take over. The British hadn't been there to resist. And then the British undertook to try to get the country in shape and spent a great deal of money there until a year ago last March. They advised us that they could not continue, and our government decided, on the recommendation of President Truman, to take over where the British had been operating, both in military assistance and in economic assistance, and we have been carrying the major burden since that time.